Yeah, I'll just perhaps make one last intervention. I probably shouldn't try and respond to the previous member, but I will make a number of comments. Well, I think the point that we, not just myself, but others have tried to make, is that if the member looks at the facts are that only 10 people in the history of New Zealand have ever been jailed for animal cruelty. Furthermore, we have for the past 10 years, we have had 3-year jail sentences for people prosecuted for animal cruelty. But nobody has gone to jail, barely anyone's gone to jail, but certainly nobody has ever gone to jail for 3 years. So if we look at the facts, simply talking about adding yet more sentences isn't going to result in greater prosecutions. What I have already pointed out, the best thing that this bill does, and why we are very pleased to support this bill, is it makes it easier to prosecute. It is introducing a new category which makes it easier to prosecute, for which reason we are extremely pleased to support this bill. And furthermore, we are pleased that the government has seen fit to increase the number of inspectors, because the simple fact is it doesn't matter how many years we say we're going to put people into jail. If there are only 5 inspectors in New Zealand to bring about prosecutions, there's going to be virtually nobody ever prosecuted, and this has been the reality. And so it is good that at last we are addressing the issue seriously. We are doubling the number of inspectors who will be able to bring about prosecutions, and we're giving some greater support to the SPCA, who do valiant work, taking 90% of the prosecutions, even though 60% of them are volunteers and most of them, or at least 50% of them, only work part-time. So against all the odds, scratching around, having cake stalls, the only enforcement agency in New Zealand that has to pay for itself, that's a charitable organisation that has to run around with baking cakes, etc., to try to pay for itself. The valiant work the SPCA does, we hope that this will be that they will be better supported as a result of the new budget initiative by the Minister. But the real issue that we should be addressing, which I have talked about, is the fact that there is a double standard in New Zealand. This bill reinforces that. This bill addresses the individual acts of cruelty and completely turns a blind eye to the serious animal cruelty that takes place through the institutional cruelty of animals. There is one further matter that I'd like to mention in this debate, and that is that one submitter argued that veterinarians should be obliged to report suspected cases of animal abuse. He said this would be an incredibly effective way of monitoring animal abuse and make it much more effective. And I thought that this was a very interesting proposal. MAF rejected their proposal. They said, well, look, there's already some in the Code of Conduct of Vets, they're already supposed to do this. But then they pointed out that the problem is that even though veterinarians are supposed to intervene when they become aware of animal suffering and report the case to MAF, the fact is they're not legally protected from the potential consequences of making an animal welfare complaint about a client. So I think this is an issue that we ought to look at, because the reality is that if veterinarians did do what their code suggests, which is that they have to take an action if they see suffering, unreasonable suffering from animals, then veterinarians would be leading the campaign to get rid of sow crates and battery hen cages in New Zealand. Instead of being completely silent and completely complicit in this issue, veterinarians would be leading the charge. But the problem is, I guess, that if a veterinarian did point out some of the reality of what happens to sows locked up in cages, they could be, as MAF points out, they'd have no legal protection if they took a complaint about a client. And I presume that is the reason, client capture, why so many veterinarians, who after all are passionate about animals, are silent about these practices.
Members, the question is that clauses 1 to 10 stand part. Those of that opinion will say aye. Contrary will say no. The ayes have it. I will report this bill without amendment.
Mr Chairman.
Mr Speaker, the committee has considered the Animal Welfare Amendment Bill and reports it without amendment. Mr Speaker, I move that the report be adopted.
Members, the question is that the report be adopted. Those who are in favour say aye. Aye. Contrary, no. Carried. This bill is set down for third reading next sitting day. I now call on Government Order of the Day number 4.